Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw. Your next photo. Now, first of all, did you make the next photo?
Tell me what the photo is, and I'll tell you if I made it.
So it's a photo of a. Okay, there is a beautiful yellow and white flower that's quite dainty. It's like a wildflower, and on it is a bee that is holding onto the top of the thing. I will look at the title. It says "Relationship at Risk." Yeah. So you know what the image is?
I do. Yeah, I did take that picture.
Great photo. Nice.
So that photo captures something that is one of the big themes of climate change biology, and that is how the changing climate is disrupting relationships in nature and changing the timing of events in nature. The species that you're looking at there is, first of all, a wildflower called death camas, which, like many plants, it produces toxins to ward off would-be attackers.
Right.
You know, it puts toxins in its leaves to ward off herbivores, and it puts them in its seeds to ward off anything that might nibble them, a mouse or what have you. Lots of plants do that. Death camas, though, puts its poisons everywhere. The whole plant is toxic. The pollen and the nectar are toxic. Right? The scientific name for this plant is Toxicoscordion venenosum venenosum, which means poisonous bulb, poisonous. I mean, you can't get more poisonous than this plant. Which is great in terms of being protected against herbivores, but it puts the plant, from an evolutionary standpoint, it has put the plant in a bit of a bind when it comes to pollination.
Sure.
Because it's pretty hard to attract insects to your flowers when, instead of offering them a tasty reward, you are offering them seizures and paralysis, and death.
Wow.
So the bee that you see on that flower is one of only a handful of species, and the only bee that has figured out a way to tolerate death camas poison.
Okay.
So what you see developing then there is a very tight, codependent, co-evolved relationship between the flower and the bee, in that the bee has an almost exclusive source of pollen and nectar all to itself. And the plant, on the other hand, has a very dedicated pollinator that's going to just visit its flowers all day long. So what's happening, however, is that as the climate warms during the springtime and the air temperatures warm, the plants are now blooming in many places 2 weeks or longer earlier than they did just 30 years ago, responding to those warm air temperatures. It makes sense. The bees, however, nest in the ground.
Okay.
Where temperatures are warming much more slowly.
Oh, okay.
So the bees are still on the old schedule. And if that trend continues, it threatens to pull these two codependent species apart. Not in space, they're still in the same landscapes, but it's pulling them apart in time.
Yes.
Creating what we call in biology a timing mismatch, so that you would have the flowers blooming too early for their bees and the bees emerging too late for their flowers. This is a situation that we worry about a lot now as things change, particularly for those very specialized relationships like that one, where you have these two species that really depend upon one another. And if they respond to climate change differently or at different times, the relationship that binds them is at risk.
Well, okay, so where's the distribution of this plant and therefore the bees?
Yeah, so death camas is very widely distributed in the American West, from the southwestern landscapes all the way up, west of the Rocky Mountains in meadows, all the way through the American West up into southern Canada. You'll find.
Okay, is it toxic to humans?
Yes, and occasionally you will see stories about people getting sick or dying from this plant, in that when it is in its vegetative stage, before it blooms, the plant looks very similar to blue camas, which is an edible plant. And they both have little, small bulbs that you can dig up and eat.
Wow.
they're not all that tasty. But people have historically eaten blue camas. That was a very important starch food for many Native Americans, and some people still eat it.
Yeah.
It's one of the few starches in a lot of these wildflower meadows. But before the bloom, right, these things look very similar. And sometimes people mistake one for the other and get very sick or even perish.
Right. So, okay. So how do we motivate? Okay. Somebody who's listening to this, how do we ignite that kind of, that interest? First of all, in your book, I think we've covered your book very nicely. I'll definitely get it. But how do we create that sort of internal like driver to say, hey, either I want to get involved, I want to learn more, I want to take action. So where can people can find the book, I guess, online and order it, but what else? Like what else can people do to find out? First of all, your name is totally memorable. I usually forget names in a second, but Thor Hanson, you're in my brain forever. But yeah, so how do people take the next step?
What I think we need to do in terms of sort of reconnecting ourselves with the natural world, and I mean this in terms of seeing more in terms of natural history, noticing more in terms of the climate change processes that are happening in our own backyards wherever we live, we have to break down a little bit of the barriers that we erect unconsciously between what we consider the human world and the natural world. Those are imaginary barriers,
Yep.
but they are, nonetheless very significant ones in terms of how we see nature.
Sure.
And I think it's very instructive, if you can ever get a chance to do it, to enter or re-enter nature with a child. I mean, if you don't have borrow a child. If you don't have a child, you get out there with a young child, because they have not developed the full suite of filters that we all use to block out information.
Yeah.
I'm in a city right now, and if I were to walk out into that city with no filters in place, that's actually a significant sensory overload. There are conditions that people study where you lack those filters, you can hardly move. You can hardly move around. There's too much information
Absolutely.
coming in, right? So we block out information unconsciously. We learn to do it, but that will block out the song of a swallow or a warbler just as well as it blocks out someone's annoying ringtone.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
So we have to learn ways to retrain our ears and our eyes and our senses to notice what's happening around us. And when we do that, and going out with a child is a really great way to remind ourselves of what's out there. Don't, on your next hike, don't take field guides, take a small child, because they will see all this stuff that you are missing, whether it's the salamanders or the spider eggs or anything down there in the weeds that all of us have trained ourselves to overlook. So I think doing that, making an effort to do that, listening and watching when we go outside, really helps us to notice nature in a way and remind ourselves of the connections that exist between our world and the natural world. They're one and the same.
Thor, I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. I'm going to send you a link to a photo gallery that I've made here in Hong Kong. I don't know if you've been to Hong Kong before, but it's bonkers fertile and green. The biodiversity here would blow your mind. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on, and it was fun chatting with you. And I look forward to seeing the pictures of the nature in your backyard.
Sure. Okay, Thor. Thank you so much.
Sure thing. Take care. Bye now.
So, is life really a gift? Really? Can you make every second count? That's the whole point of the podcast. So if you like what you've seen and you're inspired, because that really is my mission, then please give it a like, subscribe, and share.
Shooting it raw?
Yes, shooting it raw.